The knock came twice quiet, and even the way a person knocks when they have already decided not to leave. 15 minutes earlier, the message had left Owen Carter's thumb before he read the name. I keep thinking about the way you bite your lip and turn away when something's funny, like you won't let yourself laugh. One day I want to see you laugh for real. It had not been meant for her. Down the hall, his 7-year-old daughter was asleep. On the step stood Isabel Marsh, his boss phone lit in her hand screen turned toward him. Her car idled at the curb, headlights aimed at his door. "Say that again to my face," she said. The mistake was on slide 7, a revenue figure carried over from the previous quarter with the decimal in the wrong place, and Owen Carter found it at 7:40 in the morning, an hour before anyone else reached the 32nd floor. He fixed it, saved the file under the same name, and mentioned it to no one. That was the part of the job nobody had ever written down. By 8, he had her coffee waiting on the left corner of her desk. Cortado extra hot. No sugar, poured into the ceramic cup she kept in the bottom drawer of her own desk, because she disliked the taste of paper. 3 years of mornings had taught him that. The same 3 years had taught him to be gone from the room before she arrived, because Isabel Marsh did not thank people for things she had not asked for, and Owen had stopped needing her to. The board meeting started at 9. He stood at the back with the laptop close enough to change a slide far enough to be furniture. It went badly for 40 minutes, and then it went strange. Gerald Whitmore, who had been on the board longer than Isabel had been alive, tried to compliment the quarter and got tangled in it. What he said was that the company had beaten expectations, and that in fairness, the expectations had not been high. He heard himself a half-second too late. The room went stiff in the particular way rooms go stiff when nobody wants to be the first to breathe. Owen was watching Isabel because he was always watching Isabel. It was his job to know when she wanted the next slide. She bit the inside of her lower lip and turned her face toward the window. 2 seconds, maybe less. Then she was back saying something level and cold about revised targets, and the meeting moved on, and 11 people in that room went on believing they had just watched a woman with no reaction at all. She had been laughing. She had simply refused to do it where anyone could see. Owen carried it around for the rest of the day like a stone in his shoe. Not the moment itself, which was nothing. The fact that he had kept it. He had no use for it. He had watched a woman he worked for decline to laugh, and some part of him had filed it away with the coffee order and the slide corrections in the drawer, where he kept the things about her that nobody had asked him to know. At 5:30 he stood in her doorway with his coat already on and told her he had to leave. He did not say why. He never said why. And she had never once asked, which he had decided long ago was a kindness rather than indifference. She looked up from her screen. She looked at the coat and then at him for a beat longer than the moment required. "Go," was all she said. He was at the elevator before he realized she had still been watching. The house always looked worse at night. It was a rented 1-story over on Fenwick with a screen door that had never latched properly and a front step that held the heat until midnight. Dishes from breakfast sat in the sink because there had been no time before school. The invoice for Sophie's after-school program was held to the refrigerator door by a magnet shaped like a strawberry, dated 9 days ago unpaid. A jacket lay on the floor, exactly where a 7-year-old had stepped out of it. Sophie took her time going down the way she always did. She wanted the hallway light on. She wanted the glass of milk he had already brought her. She wanted to know whether her teacher, Mrs. Vance, could see through the back of her head, because it seemed like she could. Then, with her eyes already closing, she asked him when he was going to get a girlfriend. Owen sat on the edge of the bed and told her that he had a friend named Rachel, and that they had been going out for a while and that these things took time. "Does she come over?" Sophie asked. "Not yet." "Why not?" He said something about schedules. Sophie accepted it because she was 7 and rolled over and was asleep in under a minute. Owen sat there in the dark a while longer holding a glass of milk She had not finished thinking that his daughter had just asked the only question that mattered, and he had answered it with logistics. He carried the milk out to the back step and set it on the rail beside him, still warm against his palm. The night was warm too, and the block was quiet enough to hear a television going 2 houses down. He was tired in the way that stops being about sleep. He typed with his thumb one-handed without thinking about it much, which was the entire problem. Meetings all day. I'm wrecked. And I keep thinking about the way you bite your lip and turn away when something's funny, like you won't let yourself laugh. One day, I want to see you laugh for real, not hide it. Sent at 2 minutes past 10. He read the name at the top of the thread 2 seconds later. Isabel Marsh. There is a particular silence that happens inside a person's head at a moment like that, and it is not panic. Panic came afterward. First, there was only a very calm, very quiet recognition that something had happened, which could not be made, not to have happened. He tried to delete it. The thread offered to delete it for him, which meant it would vanish from his phone and stay exactly where it was on hers. He typed an apology. Deleted it, typed a shorter one, deleted that. He opened a blank document and wrote the words, effective immediately. I am resigning from my position, and stared at them, and then he thought about the strawberry magnet and the invoice underneath it, and he deleted those too. Then he sat on the back step with a glass of cooling milk beside him and waited for absolutely nothing to happen, because nothing was what happened when you sent a message like that to a woman like her. She would read it. She would decide something. It would arrive on Monday in an email with human resources copied. The knock came at 10:17. It came twice, quiet and even. Owen opened the door 4 inches and stopped there, and it was not pride that stopped him. Sophie was asleep 12 feet down the hallway behind him in a room with the door open because she liked it open. Isabel stood on his step in the blazer she had worn since the 9 o'clock meeting. Her phone was lit and her hand screen turned toward him. Her car sat at the curb with the engine running and the headlights aimed at his door, and something about that was worse than anything she could have said. She had not come to stay. Say that again to my face, she said. She said it quietly, because he had brought his own voice down to nothing, and she had matched him without being asked. Neither of them acknowledged it, but it meant that the entire conversation happened in the register people use, in the dark, close to a door frame, and it made every word land about 4 inches too near. It wasn't for you, Owen said. I can read. She turned the screen a fraction as though he might have forgotten. Who was it for? Rachel. Rachel Doyle. We've been seeing each other since April. He could have stopped there. It was true, it was complete, and it would have let both of them go to bed with their dignity partially intact. What he said instead was the thing that had been sitting in his chest since 9 in the morning. The message was for her, he said. The part in the middle isn't. Isabel went very still. This morning, Owen went on still barely above a whisper, when Whitmore said the expectations weren't high. You bit your lip and you turned toward the window so nobody would see it. That's not Rachel. Rachel laughs out loud at everything. She's never hidden anything in her life. I wrote it to her, and it wasn't about her. He heard how it sounded. He said it anyway. I don't know why I remembered that. I've been trying to figure it out all day. Somewhere down the block, a car door closed and a dog started up and stopped. Nobody has ever seen that, she said at last. Her voice had gone somewhere further back in her throat. 11 people in that room. Nobody has ever seen that. Her eyes came up to his. Not the man I was married to. 9 years. He was still working out what to do with that when she shifted and put the phone away and became a different person. Entirely the one who ran meetings. You want to know why I got here in 15 minutes, she said. Emergency session of the board. It ran until 9:30. I read your message sitting in a parking garage 9 blocks from here, and then I drove here instead of going home. She let that sit exactly long enough. Hale Group has made an offer for us. Merger on their terms. We have 3 weeks to answer. The man on the other side of that table is Preston Hale. Owen knew the name from filings. He also knew something the filings did not say. You're not firing me, he said. No. She was looking at his door, not at him. I'm about to spend 3 weeks in a building full of people who will say whatever keeps them employed. I need one person incapable of hiding anything, and tonight you proved that in the most humiliating way available to you. So you stay. That's one thing. There are 3. She held up a finger. Monday, your reporting line moves to operations. You'll answer to Dana Reyes. Your salary doesn't change, and my signature stops touching your file. That landed harder than the rest of it. Why? Because your daughter is asleep behind that door, and you cannot afford me. She said it without softening it. From now on, you can say no to me and lose nothing. I need to know that anything you say to me, you say because you want to, not because you're frightened of me. Owen found he had nothing to put against that. And the third, for 3 weeks, Isabel said. You don't say that sentence to me again. Not once. And after 3 weeks, she was already turning toward the running car, the headlights sliding across her face. After 3 weeks, she said, I'll answer it. Rachel Doyle chose the coffee place on 9th because it sat halfway between her apartment and his, which was the sort of fairness she applied to everything. It was the first Saturday since the knock. Owen told her what had happened. Not the version that made him look better, the whole of it. The message, the name at the top of the thread, the 15 minutes the woman standing outside his door at 10:17 at night. Rachel listened all the way through without once touching her cup. Say it out loud, she said when he finished. The message, I want the actual words. He gave them to her. The part about the way she bit her lip and turned away when something was funny, like she would not let herself laugh. The part about wanting one day to see her laugh for real. Rachel considered it the way she considered everything thoroughly and without hurrying. I don't do that, she said. I laugh at commercials. I laughed at my own grandmother's funeral, Owen. I have never in my life hidden a single thing I felt. What crossed her face then was closer to sympathy than to anger. You wrote that for somebody. It just wasn't me. He started to say her name, and she lifted 2 fingers off the table, and he stopped. Don't apologize, she said. That's the part that would actually insult me. 3 months, and you never once asked me anything you didn't already know the answer to. She gathered her bag onto her shoulder. You were being polite. I let you because I liked the company. We can both admit that. She paid for her own coffee on the way out, which he had known she would. He walked the 20 blocks home instead of taking the train. Somewhere around the 9th block, he understood what she had actually said to him, and it was worse than being left. He had spent 3 months with a woman whose face he could not have drawn from memory. He could have drawn the other one. 2 seconds of it in a boardroom on a Thursday morning with 11 people watching and nobody seeing. The reassignment came through on Monday at 9 minutes past 8. A form email with Dana Reyes copied subject line, reporting structure administrative update. Dana ran operations out of the 28th floor and had a handshake like a car door closing. She told Owen she had no intention of managing him, that his day-to-day would not change by a single minute, and that if anybody upstairs ever leaned on him, he was to walk down 4 flights and tell her about it. That's not usually how this works, Owen said. No, Dana agreed. It isn't. Nothing else about the arrangement was ever explained to him, and he understood that nothing would be. The next 2 weeks were a machine. Hale Group's diligence team took over the 11th floor and requested documents in batches of 400. Lawyers arrived in the morning and were still there when the cleaners came. Isabel ran 3 meetings a day and read until midnight, and Owen learned the particular exhaustion of watching someone work harder than he had ever seen a human being work, while pretending he had not noticed. They were flawless with each other. That was the strange part. In front of the diligence team, They were a chief executive and the man who managed her calendar, and there was not a syllable between them that could have been used against either one. She called him Carter in meetings. He called her nothing at all, because he never needed to. But on the fourth day, he came back from the printer and found a cup on the left corner of his own desk. Cortado extra hot. No sugar. He looked at it for a long moment, then at the glass wall of her office, where she was on the phone with her back to him. He did not thank her. She had never wanted that from him, and he found he did not want it from her. The messages began that same week. They were about work, every one of them without exception, and he could have handed any of them to human resources without a second thought. Send me the Fairfield schedule. Whitmore wants a call. Thursday put him at 4. They arrived at 11 at night at midnight, once at 1:10 in the morning, and they ended always with a period. Nobody typed a period at 1 in the morning. A period at 1 in the morning meant a person sitting alone in a lit office holding a phone, deciding to send something, and then deciding how to end it. On the 7th day, one of the Hale attorneys, a young man named Curtis Boyd, who had not yet learned to read a room, presented an integration timeline, and said that, of course, the cultural side would be simpler here, given how few people at this company seemed emotionally attached to anything. The room did what rooms do. Owen was standing at the back with the laptop. He was not watching the attorney. Isabel bit the inside of her lower lip and turned her face toward the window. Then, and this had never happened, not once in 3 years, she came back from the window and found Owen's eyes across the length of the table and held them for a full second before she looked away and said something cold about revised timelines. She had known he would be watching. That was the whole of it. She had done the thing she had spent her adult life doing in private, and then she had checked deliberately that one person in the room had seen it. Owen changed the slide. His hand was not entirely steady on the trackpad. Preston Hale came in person on the 8th day. Owen had built an image of him out of 4 years of quiet avoidance, and had gotten it wrong in every particular. For 4 years, Isabel had declined every conference, every panel and every industry dinner held in the city where Hale Group kept its headquarters, and Owen had booked the flights around that hole in the map without ever once being told what was in it. The man who walked into the 32nd floor conference room was warm. He shook hands with everyone, including the 2 junior analysts nobody ever shook hands with. He apologized for his own attorney's timeline comment before anyone raised it, and did it well enough to get a laugh out of Gerald Whitmore, who had not laughed at anything in the building since the spring. Within 10 minutes, Preston Hale owned the room. That was the thing about him, and Owen understood it, immediately and completely. He was not a man you could point at. He was the most likable person present, and he would remain the most likable person present, right up until the moment he did something unforgivable, and afterward everyone would remember how pleasant he had been. He turned to Isabel roughly 20 minutes in the middle of a point about warehouse consolidation. "You know, Belle used to have a line about this," he said, easy, affectionate, addressing the whole table rather than her. "Back when it was the 2 of us and a rented floor over on Cutler Street. She used to say a company is just a promise with a payroll attached." He smiled at her down the table. "I've quoted that in 4 countries. I always credit you." Nobody at that table had ever heard anyone call her Belle. The board members smiled because it was a charming thing to say, and it was clearly meant kindly, and one of them made a small remark about how nice it was that the 2 of them could do this. The meeting moved forward. Owen was standing at the back as usual, 4 feet behind her left shoulder. Her right hand was under the edge of the table where nobody could see it, and the pen in it had gone white through her knuckles, and it stayed that way for the next 4 minutes. Preston had not said anything about their marriage. He had not needed to. He had simply put a private thing on a public table in front of the people who decided her future and let them all watch him hand it back to her, generously, with credit. He had reminded 11 people that there had been a time when she belonged to somebody, and he had done it in a way that made him look like the better man for mentioning it. At the break, Preston came down the length of the room with his hand already out. "Owen," he said. "Owen Carter, Isabel's assistant." Nobody had introduced them. Owen's name was not on the attendee list. Assistants were not on attendee lists. "That's right," Owen said, taking the hand. Preston's grip was pleasant and brief. He looked at Owen with what appeared from any distance at all to be genuine friendliness. "Personal assistant. 3 years, I think." He glanced toward the front of the room where Isabel was speaking with Dana Reyes and not looking at either of them. "She always picks loyal ones. She's just never been very good at keeping them." He was gone before Owen had finished deciding what his face was doing. Kelsey Ward had collected Sophie from the after-school program at 5 o'clock every weekday for 2 years and had never once been late. On the 12th day, she called at 4:20 to say her car had died on the expressway, and she was so sorry. She was so sorry. The signing package for the first tranche of diligence documents had to be out by midnight. There was nobody else. Owen had run out of nobody else's roughly 2 years ago. So he left at 4:30, drove across town, collected his daughter from a gymnasium full of children waiting for people who were not him, and brought her back to the 32nd floor in her school clothes carrying a backpack with a horse on it and asking whether this was the building where he did the emails. He set her up in the small conference room next to his desk with paper and the box of markers he kept in his bottom drawer for exactly this, which had happened twice before. Both times at 10 o'clock at night, when the floor was empty. It was 6:15. The floor was not empty. At 7, Owen came back from the copy room and found the conference room door open and Isabel Marsh inside it. She was standing at the far end of the table with her arms folded at a distance from the child that could only be described as tactical. Sophie was kneeling on a chair with a marker in each hand. "So the reason I'm asking," Isabel was saying in the voice she used with the board, "is that there appear to be 2 sons in this drawing, and I want to understand whether that's intentional." Sophie looked at the picture. "It's 1 son and 1 balloon." "That's a considerably better answer than I expected," Isabel said. Sophie went back to her marker. "You didn't ask a very good question." Owen stopped in the doorway with his heart somewhere up near his throat. Isabel did not throw him out. She went into her own office, came back with a tin of shortbread that Owen had ordered for her in December and had never once seen. Opened, put it on the table in front of a 7-year-old, and pushed it 2 inches closer. Sophie took one. Then she looked up at the woman standing over her all the way up and asked the question with the total unconcern of somebody who has not yet learned that adults can be dangerous. "Aren't you hot?" Isabel glanced down at herself. Blazer buttoned, 7:30 in the evening. "I'm used to it," she said. "But it's warm in here." Sophie broke the shortbread in half and did not eat either half. "My dad says people only put on a lot of clothes when they're cold." She said it the way she said everything, which was as though it were simply information. "Are you cold?" Isabel Marsh had been asked hostile questions by 3 regulators, 2 journalists, and a room full of institutional investors in a single calendar year, and Owen watched her fail to produce an answer to this one. Then she did something he had never seen her do in 3 years and would not have believed if it had been described to him. She unbuttoned the blazer, pulled out the chair beside the child and sat down, and when that still put her 1.5 feet above Sophie's eye line, she went the rest of the way down onto the carpet with her back against the chair leg so that the 2 of them were level. "It's not that I'm cold," she said. "It's that where I work, if people can see what you're wearing underneath, they'll try to take it." Sophie thought about this seriously. "That's dumb," she concluded. "It is," Isabel agreed. Sophie slid the paper across the carpet at her. It was a house with a red door and too many windows and 3 people standing in front of it, and it had clearly been in progress for some time. Isabel looked at it much longer than a drawing takes to look at. "Who's this?" she asked, touching the corner of the page near the smallest figure. "Me. And this one. That's my dad. He has the big shoes." Owen, still in the doorway, looked at his shoes. "And the third," Isabel said. Sophie shrugged, entirely unbothered, and reached over to take back her marker. "I don't know yet," she said. "I left that part blank." By the 15th day, the floor was empty by 10 and stayed empty. The lawyers had gone back to their own offices. The Hale team had returned 400 documents with 600 questions attached, and Isabel had answered every one of them herself because she trusted no one else to. Owen ordered food at 9:30. It arrived cold because everything arrived cold on the 32nd floor, and they ate it out of the containers at the corner of her desk with the overhead lights off and only the lamp on. "He didn't cheat on me," she said. Owen had not asked. He had been careful for 15 days not to ask. "That's what everyone assumes." She went on turning a plastic fork over without using it. "It's the easy story. Woman gets left. Woman gets hard. I've let people believe it for 4 years because the real one makes me sound like an idiot." She told it without any color in her voice at all, which was somehow worse. There had been a process hers developed over 18 months in a rented floor on Cutler Street, the thing the entire first company had been built on. When it came time to file, Preston had handled the filing, because Preston handled all the filings, because she was busy building the thing that was being filed. Her name was not on it. It had never been on it. "I found out 14 months later," she said, "from a footnote in a document I was proofreading for him." The fork stopped moving, and when I asked him about it, he was kind. That's what I need you to understand. He wasn't cruel about it, not once, not ever. He was patient. He explained that we'd discussed the structure at length, that I'd agreed it made sense for tax purposes, that he had a whole email chain where I'd said so. She looked up. There was an email chain. I'd said so. In the way you say yes to a thing you don't understand, because the person explaining it loves you. Owen had stopped eating a while ago. "It took me 4 years to stop believing I made it up," Isabel said. "Not 4 years to get over him. 4 years to be certain I wasn't crazy. Those are different projects." She set the fork down. "And a week ago he walked into my building and called me Belle in front of my board, and I sat there and let him, because if I flinch, they'll all see there's something to flinch at." The lamp hummed. 32 floors down, a siren went somewhere and faded out. "Sophie's mother left on a Tuesday," Owen said. Isabel turned her head. "That's the detail I can't get rid of. Not the leaving. The Tuesday." He was looking at the container in his hands. "It was a completely ordinary morning. I made eggs. Sophie was 3, and she was in her chair. I went to work. I came back at 6, and there was a note on the refrigerator under the strawberry magnet, and it was 4 sentences long, and one of them was about the car insurance." He had never said any of this out loud to another adult. He discovered this while it was happening. "The hard part isn't what you'd think," he said. "It's not the nights. It's that for 4 years I've been running a performance for an audience of 1, every single day. She comes down the hall, and I'm fine. Money's fine. Work's fine. Dad's fine." He finally looked at her. "She's 7. She can't carry it. So I carry it, and I smile, and the whole time I'm terrified that the thing she's actually learning from me is how to lie about being all right." Neither of them said anything for a while, and it was not an awkward silence. It was the other kind. The kind where 2 people have just set something heavy down at the same time and are standing there with empty hands discovering they are not what they had been telling everyone they were. "We're not cold," Isabel said at last. "That's what your daughter got right in about 10 seconds. We're not cold, and we're not strong. We're 2 people wearing coats in a heated room." She had leaned in. Or he had. The distance between them had closed to something that could not be explained by furniture. He could see the exact moment she decided. She sat back and picked up the fork. 6 days, she said. It was 4 days later that Preston Hale asked for a private conversation and got it and put 3 photographs on the table. The first was a still from a traffic camera at the top of Fenwick, a car at the curb outside a 1-story rental with its headlights burning. The timestamp read 10:15. The second and third came from a doorbell camera mounted on the house directly across the street. A woman in a blazer crossing the road at 10:16. The same woman on the front step at 10:17, her face perfectly clear. The homeowner uses a monitoring service, Preston said pleasantly when Isabel's eyes stayed on the third photograph. We hold a position in the parent company. It took 4 telephone calls, and it was entirely legal, which I'd have thought would bother you more than it does. Beside the photographs, he set down a printed personnel file. Owen Carter, 3 years of service, single father 1, dependent 1 income, no secondary earner listed anywhere on the form. I want to be very careful here. Preston went on, and he sounded careful. He sounded like a man doing something distasteful because circumstances required it. I'm not accusing you of anything. I don't think anything happened. I've known you 13 years, Belle, and I know exactly how you'd behave. Isabel said nothing at all. But there's a version of this that goes to your board, he continued. And it isn't a story about a woman visiting an employee. It's a chief executive at a subordinate's residence at 10:17 at night, 4 days before that subordinate's reporting line was quietly moved off her desk. I didn't have to dig for the reassignment, incidentally. It was in the diligence file. Your own people gave it to me. He aligned the photographs into a neat stack with 1 finger. Sign the revised terms, he said. Mine, not yours, the ones your counsel keeps sending back. Do that and this stays in a drawer forever, and I mean forever. I have no interest in embarrassing you. And if I don't, Isabel said, then the photographs go to Whitmore, along with a note from our compliance people flagging a potential harassment exposure. Not an allegation, a flag. Preston shook his head slightly, and the awful thing was that he did look regretful. Here's what I want you to understand, because you're not thinking about it yet. And you should. You'd lose a deal. That's all it costs you. You'd be a chief executive with a difficult quarter and a personal rumor. And in 18 months, nobody would remember. He stood and buttoned his jacket. He'd lose the ability to be hired anywhere in this industry ever again. There's no hearing. There's no verdict. There's just a man with a 7-year-old and a phone that stops ringing. At 4:30 that afternoon, Preston Hale found Owen by the elevators on the 11th floor and asked warmly whether he had a moment. The moment took 12 minutes and was entirely pleasant. There was an operations role opening at a Hale subsidiary in Charlotte. Real work, real title reporting to a woman Preston described as the best manager he had ever employed. The relocation package covered everything. He slid a folder across, and inside the folder was a signing figure that Owen looked at twice. I'll be direct with you, because I think you'd prefer it, Preston said. You're standing next to something that's about to get loud. It isn't your fault, and it isn't fair, and it will not matter. He tapped the folder once. That number puts your daughter through high school without you thinking about it. It's not a bribe, Owen. There's nothing I need you to do. It's just an exit that doesn't cost you anything offered by somebody who's seen how these things end. He left the folder on the table, which was the only genuinely aggressive thing he did in the entire conversation. Owen found her at 9 that night in her office with the lamp on and the door open. He told her all of it. The elevators, the folder, the number, the city in another state. He was still talking when he realized she had not reacted to any of the parts a person would react to, and that meant she already knew, and that meant she had known first. He came to you, Owen said. This afternoon. With what? She told him about the photographs because she had decided somewhere in the last 5 hours that she was going to tell him the truth. He could see her doing it. He could see her arriving at it the way she arrived at everything in order. There's a way through this, Owen said. You go to Whitmore first, tonight. You take it away from him by saying it yourself, before he ever... I know what the options are. Then say the one you're choosing. And she almost did. He would think about the next 4 seconds for a long time afterward, because in them, her whole face changed. The buttoned thing came apart, and what was underneath it was not cold at all. It was a woman about to say something she had not said to anybody in 9 years. The phone on the desk lit up and began to ring. The name on the screen was Preston Hale. She looked at it. She looked at Owen, and something in her went quiet and shut, and the thing he had just seen underneath was gone, folded up, put away. She picked up the phone. "Preston," she said. "Yes, I've read them." Her eyes stayed on Owen the entire time, which he did not understand until much later. "I'm agreeing to the terms. All of them as drafted. Have your counsel send the execution copies in the morning." She ended the call and set the phone face down on the desk. "You didn't have to do that in front of me," Owen said. "Yes, I did." She stood and squared the papers on the desk that did not need squaring. "I've let this get out of proportion, and that's my error, so I'll correct it. A message was sent to me in error 19 days ago. It was an administrative matter. I handled it the way I handle administrative matters, and it has been closed since the night it happened. Isabel, take the Charlotte offer," she said. "It's better money, and it's a better title, and there is nothing here." She was still not looking at him. He could not know that this was the only part she was incapable of faking. He could not know that she had already worked out on the drive back from the meeting that the fastest way to make him worthless as a weapon was to make it true that he was nothing to her, and that the only way to make it true was to make him believe it first. All Owen heard was a woman he had just told about a Tuesday morning, and a note under a strawberry magnet calling it an administrative matter. "Right," he said. He picked up the folder and he went home, and Sophie was asleep, and he sat on the back step for a long time with the block quiet around him, thinking about how much simpler his life had been 19 days ago when he had known exactly what he was and had not yet been offered the chance to want anything. Owen stayed on the step until the last of the traffic thinned off Fenwick, and somewhere around 2 in the morning the shape of it finally came clear. Preston had not threatened Isabel. Preston had threatened him and used her to carry it. The photographs by themselves were only a woman crossing a street at night. What gave them teeth was the second document the personnel filed the line that said Owen Carter reported into the office of the chief executive the words, "Single father. 1. Dependent 1 income sitting there in a box on a form. A complaint required a subordinate. Without one, there was no exposure to flag, no compliance note to write, nothing for Gerald Whitmore to hold in his hands and frown at. He was the weapon. Not because of anything he had done, because of what he was, a man who could be ruined cheaply by somebody who would never have to raise his voice to do it. There was exactly one way to take the weapon off the table, and it cost him everything he had. He typed the letter at 4 in the morning and read it 4 times. At 8:15 on Wednesday, he walked down 4 flights and put it in Dana Reyes's hand, rather than her inbox. Resignation effective immediately. Attached to it on a second page, a signed statement that he had no complaint against the company or any officer of it, that he was leaving voluntarily, that he was requesting nothing, no severance, no letter, no consideration of any kind. Dana read both pages twice. She was not a woman who pretended to misunderstand things. "You're gutting somebody's leverage," she said. "Yes. Do you have anything lined up?" "No." She asked whether he wanted her to walk it upstairs personally, and Owen said he would rather she did not, and Dana said that was unfortunate because she was going to anyway. On his way out, he stopped on the 11th floor and left the Charlotte folder at the reception desk with the flap still sealed. He did not write a note. There was nothing to put in it that Preston Hale would not have found charming. That afternoon, he paid the after-school invoice with money he did not have. Then he lifted the strawberry magnet off the refrigerator door, dropped the paid invoice in the bin, and put the magnet back where it had always been. Sophie came home at 4 with her horse backpack and found him already there, which had happened perhaps 6 times in her entire life. He told her the truth in the size she could hold, that he had left his job, that he would be home a lot more for a while, that they would be careful about money for a few months, and it would be fine. She took it the way she took most things, which was calmly and with follow-up questions. Then she stopped in the middle of unpacking her folder and looked at him. "You're sad because of the lady with too many clothes on," she said. Owen did not answer, and his daughter, who was 7, decided not to make him. Dana Reyes carried the letter up on Wednesday afternoon and found the office empty. Isabel had been off-site with counsel since 7 that morning and did not come back. It sat on her desk overnight on top of the Hale execution copies that had arrived that same morning and had been lying there since unsigned. She had not been able to explain to herself why she had not signed them. She read Owen's letter standing up at 11 o'clock Thursday morning. It took her about 4 seconds to understand what he had done, and another 20 to understand that he had done it without telling her, because he had believed her on Tuesday night when she had called him an administrative matter. She telephoned Gerald Whitmore at 20 past 11 and asked for an emergency session of the board that afternoon. The last one had been held 9 blocks from Fenwick Street, and she had walked out of it into a parking garage and read a message that was not meant for her. This one she did not walk out of. She told them herself, all of it in order before Preston Hale ever had the chance to, that a personal message had been sent to her in error on a Thursday night 3 weeks earlier, that she had driven to the employee's house and stood at his door at 10:17, that she had moved his reporting line to operations 4 days later, deliberately so that no decision affecting his employment would ever pass across her desk again, that her judgment had been personally involved from that night forward, and she had not disclosed it, and that Preston Hale had come to her on Tuesday with photographs of all of it and a proposal that she sign his revised terms in exchange for his silence. She put copies of the photographs on the table herself. That was the part Whitmore never quite got over, that she had handed them out. Then she recused herself from the negotiation entirely and left the room while they discussed her. The weapon died the moment she said it out loud, which was the only thing about that afternoon that went the way she wanted. Everything else cost exactly what it was always going to cost. The board split more or less down the middle, and Whitmore led the half that agreed she had behaved with integrity in the room and appallingly for 3 weeks before it. With the chief executive recused, the revised terms had nobody left to sign them, and the 3-week deadline expired that night with nothing on paper. Counsel on both sides spent the next fortnight trying to rebuild a transaction around a company whose chief executive was no longer permitted to sit at the table. Preston withdrew the offer on a Friday, citing changed circumstances, and was gracious about it in a way that made him look wounded. The stock fell 19% over the week that followed. 2 trade publications ran her name in the headline, and one of them used the phrase "judgment questions," which would follow her for years. She had spent 10 years building the thing she lost in an afternoon. She did not pretend to herself that it had been painless. Preston came to her office one last time before his people cleared out of the 11th floor. He stood in the doorway with his coat over his arm, and he was not smiling, and for once there was nothing performed about him at all. "I don't understand you," he said. "I gave you a way out that cost you nothing. Nothing, Belle. A signature." He shook his head slowly. "You blew up a deal half your board and a decade of work. For a man who books your flights." Isabel looked at him from behind the desk. "I know you don't understand," she said. "That's the answer." She came on a Thursday night at 10:17, 6 weeks to the hour after the first time. The knock came twice, quiet and even. Owen opened the door and stopped because everything about it was wrong, in the same way a photograph is wrong when it has been reversed. There was no blazer. She was wearing a gray sweater and her hair was down and she was not holding her phone. Her hands were empty and she seemed not to know what to do with them. Her car was at the curb with the engine off and the lights off, parked properly the way a person parks, when they have no idea how long they will be. And she spoke first. "I memorized it," Isabel said. "The message. I've had it for 6 weeks, and I can't get rid of it." She recited it to him on his own front step, exactly as he had typed it one-handed on a back step, with a glass of cooling milk beside him. "Meetings all day. I'm wrecked. And I keep thinking about the way you bite your lip and turn away when something's funny, like you won't let yourself laugh. One day, I want to see you laugh for real, not hide it." The hallway light behind him fell across half her face. "I've been trying all that time to say the same thing back," she went on, "and I can only get it out one way. Meetings all day. I'm wrecked. And I keep thinking about a man who stood in this doorway and told me the truth when a lie would have saved his job. One day, I want to be the kind of person who doesn't hide it either." Owen held on to the edge of the door. "You called it an administrative matter." "I know what I called it. In front of me, after I told you about the note on the refrigerator. I needed you to believe it," Isabel said. "He was going to end you, and the only way to make you useless to him was to make it true that you were nothing to me, and I couldn't do that convincingly. Unless you believed it first." Her voice did not hold entirely steady, and she let it not hold. "It was the cruelest thing I have ever said to anyone. I've thought about it every day since. And then you went and did the same thing to me without telling me. So I suppose we've both had a turn." He should have said something else. What came out was the only thing he had been carrying since the night she drove away. "You said 3 weeks," Owen said. "It's been 6. You owe me an answer." "Yes," she said. He shook his head. "That's not an answer. It's the whole answer. That's what I've been trying to tell you." She looked up at him. "Yes." Behind him down the short hallway, a door moved. Sophie stood at the end of it in her pajamas with one fist in her eye, at an hour she had not been awake for in months. She looked at the woman on the step for a long moment, with the particular seriousness of a child assembling a fact. Whatever the adults thought was happening, it was not the thing she noticed. "You took your coat off," Sophie said. The toast burned on Saturday morning because Isabel Marsh had run a 9-figure company for 6 years and had never in her life operated a toaster with a stuck lever, and she took the failure considerably harder than she had taken the 19%. Sophie ate it anyway, scraped with too much jam, and pronounced it fine. The kitchen was small enough that 3 people in it was a logistical problem. The dishes were done because Owen had time now. There was a job interview on Monday for something smaller than what he had left, and he was not dreading it. Halfway through breakfast, Sophie got down, went to the horse backpack in the hall, and came back with a folded piece of paper. The house with the red door and too many windows carried around for 6 weeks and creased through the middle now. She flattened it against the table and picked up a marker out of the jar, and did not announce anything because nothing was being announced. She simply filled in the space she had left blank next to the man with the big shoes, the way a person finishes a drawing they have been working on for a while. Nobody made a speech about it. She was 7. She wanted to go to the park. The smallest mistake a man ever made was sending 41 words to the wrong name at 2 minutes past 10, and it broke open something 2 people had spent years sealing shut. But a message only opens a door. What kept it open was that both of them paid for it, in the one currency they actually had. He gave up the job that fed his daughter, and she gave up the standing she had built her whole life on, and neither of them told the other first. The person who understood it before either of them was the one who had never once believed a house was a place where you wear a coat.